Greetings of the day, all the viewers. This is Narendra Nimala, joined by Madhukar and Hiragange. We will be discussing about Schedule 1 transactions today under GST law. Under erstwhile regime, that is under service tax regime, services where there was consideration involved were liable to service tax. However, that has changed under GST with introduction of Schedule 1 of CGST Act. However, taxpayers have very little precedence of Schedule 1 transactions because it was non-existent under service tax regime. Therefore, during that audit time, the taxpayers could face difficulties with the scrutinies that would be undertaken by GST officers. Therefore, we decided that we would do a short video to enlighten the taxpayers with respect to Schedule 1 transaction. Before we focus on certain transactions which are generally carried out by taxpayers, I'll hand it over to Madhukar and Hiragange, who would discuss about the genesis of the thought process behind introducing Schedule 1 transactions. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Narendra. You can go to the next slide. Good morning to all the viewers today. Basically, this related person transactions have been used or misused, especially in India, and also for cross-border transactions across the world. As far as GST is concerned, there is a presumption or an understanding that transactions between related persons could be misused by way of, you could say, under invoicing, not invoicing at all, and even evading of tax. It was there in central excise and is there in customs and income tax even today in the form of transfer pricing, and in customs for looking at what is the valuation of the imported goods. Open market value was something which was there and is there in the customs law, and GST has borrowed from that. Is it correct to have borrowed from that? As far as services are concerned, is anybody's guess. As far as goods are concerned, that could be a reasonably good method of taking it forward. One aspect we all need to understand is that if one were to invoice to an unrelated third party at nil value, that means give it free of cost, it is not barred or taxed as long as it is in the course of business. For example, I would like to give samples of my food product or my medicines to those people who may be selling it, or even the consumer himself. This would be given free of cost on the assumption and the point that this will create a demand and tomorrow my goods will be better accepted in the market. While we are looking at this concept, as Narendra said, in service tax, we didn't have a point where if there is no charge, then there is no service tax. That was the way it was looked at in service tax. Similar was the presumption under VAT. In fact, in VAT, if you don't charge a consideration, there was no VAT applicable at all. Now in GST, this particular aspect has been overturned by Schedule 1 as mentioned by Narendra. However, the principles, well-settled law of service tax or the well-settled law of central excise, which is not applicable today except to a few products in central excise, is something which is useful. For example, there is an understanding that even if I'm acting or working with my related concerns, then as long as I'm arriving at an arm's length value, it is acceptable. Supreme Court in Prodalin case 2006 held this. Why is this important? This is important because as long as I take commercial decisions, it is fine. For example, Narendra is a third party and you are the related party. I may be selling to my goods to Narendra, who is a third party, who is not related to me, at 100 rupees. Whereas I am selling it to you at 90. If there is a commercial reason for it, for example, Narendra buys 1000 kgs per month. You are buying 1 lakh kgs per month. Obviously, because you are buying such a large amount, there is a commercial differentiation and it would still be held to be an arm's length value. We are not going to get into nitty-gritties, what percentage it should be, etc. The point is to, if we are able to establish arm's length price, then somewhere we can get justification for those transactions in Schedule 1 where there is no value. So we can arrive at value of arm's length. There is also one understanding. There is a thinking, especially with the tax administrators, that the moment you are an associated company, holding company, subsidiary company, you are going to be doing some undervaluation. This is not true in reality. There could be situations where there could be a valuation dip, but it's not that always it is there. Just because there is a holding company and subsidiary does not automatically indicate undervaluation. Again, the Supreme Court of India in Econ in 2005 confirmed this view. I reckon both these case laws, as long as the other case laws which are there under the excise regime, like the Bombay Tires case and even the Fiat case, may be duly differentiated, are case laws which could have an impact in GST. One aspect which is very important in this discussion of Schedule 1 would be that in case there are two related parties and there is the second party is able to take the credit fully, then the need of going for the market value is not there. As per second proviso to, I think, Rule 30, where they say that as long as the ITC is available to the recipient, this particular restriction should not be there. One question which is very important, which comes up is this restriction for that supply, or is this dependent on the recipient? For example, I am making a taxable supply to a recipient who is going to use it for taxable supplies of his own, in which case he is eligible for credit for that transaction. So should I go for the transaction, or should I go by what is the status of the recipient? Taking the example further, say the recipient is having some taxable supplies and also has exempt supplies. In that case, would I still be able to use the second proviso to Rule 30, where I can say that my recipient is eligible for credit? If we were to take the argument that the recipient is the important factor and not the transaction, it would become very difficult. Example, I have supplied goods in the month of July, and in August there is an exempt supply, or there was an exempt supply of the recipient in the month of April. Then how would this transaction be able to be completed at all when a review of what is happening at the recipient's end would be something which is important for my valuation or my supply? Remember, we are talking of international transactions. It could be a large transaction, it could be a small transaction. Therefore, it is our considered view that when we are looking at this particular proviso, we need to look at it qua transaction only. Though there is some possible gray area here, courts may also come forward in case there is a dispute, which I am quite sure there will be. With these random thoughts on the past and what is available for the future, how much of litigation is possible, I think having clarity of Schedule 1 transaction as far as related parties is concerned is very important. And I will ask Narendra to explain this in detail going forward. Thank you very much. Narendra, you can go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving us the brief background on the need for introduction of Schedule 1 under CGST law. With that, let's move ahead, understanding about how Schedule 1 has been played out under CGST Act. Section 7 defines that all forms of supply wherein there is a consideration for that particular supply would be a supply that is liable for GST. Therefore, if a transaction is happening between two unrelated parties, unless there is a consideration, it is not qualified to be a supply. However, 7.1c, section 7.1c mentions that for Schedule 1 transaction, there need not be consideration. Even then, the transaction would qualify to be a supply. If you look at the entry 2 of the Schedule 1, it provides that any supply of goods or services between two related parties or any two distinct persons, which are branches of the same entity having the same PAN number, for those transactions, there will not be consideration. Even then, there will be supply and GST needs to be paid on those particular transactions. Therefore, if there is a supply between two related persons, even though there is no consideration, GST is applicable. It is important to note that there needs to be supply in the first place. Only then we go on to pay GST. If there is no supply, then there is no GST. Section 15, the explanation to section 15 defines what a related party is, which of course includes a holding and subsidiary setup or a common shareholder having two interests in two companies. Even then those two companies would qualify to be a related party, members of the same family, employee, employer. There are various scenarios which section 15 prescribes, which also includes the transactions in focus, which is holding and subsidiary setup. Of course, distinct persons are those persons wherein a branch or a different GSTN of the same entity. Suppose I have a registration in Karnataka and I have a branch in Hyderabad, then Karnataka and Hyderabad GSTNs are considered to be two distinct entities. And if there are any supplies between these two branches, then GST needs to be paid on those transactions. We are not focusing much on the distinct persons in our session today. We will be focusing more on cross-border transactions that are happening between two related parties. With that background, let's look at some of the transactions which are generally undertaken by two related parties. First one we're focusing is intellectual property rights. Some of the examples for IPR would be patents or logos, trade licenses that are provided. These are some of the examples for intellectual property rights. The overseas parent companies often set up their subsidiaries in India because of various reasons. Availability of resources could be one of the main reasons, cheap labor. Whatever be the reason, the parent company sets up its subsidiaries in India for carrying out some operations for them, wherein parent company provides some of the IPR rights to its subsidiary, wherein the subsidiary provides the services back to the parent company. For example, a research and development activities are provided back to the parent company itself. Or if at all, some of the products are being sold by the parent company, the related support or a technical support L1, L2, what we generally call in IT/ITES industry, those support can be outsourced to the Indian subsidiary entities. While providing these services, the Indian subsidiaries would require certain IPR rights for providing the services back to the parent company itself. In that context, we believe that there is no commercial exploitation by the Indian subsidiary. Those activities or IPR rights which are provided by the parent company are purely to enable the subsidiary company to provide the services back to the parent company itself. There is no commercial exploitation in these cases, and we believe in such cases the transaction should not qualify to be a supply, and therefore once there is no supply, even though there is no consideration, GST need not be paid on those particular transactions. An income tax case law in the context of transfer pricing, the Morgan Stanley case law, it provides that activities undertaken in order to protect the interests of the recipient do not qualify to be a supply under income tax provisions. We believe similar treatment should be given under GST law as well, wherein if the parent company is giving some certain IPR rights to its subsidiary, so that subsidiary is enabled to provide services back to the parent company, in those cases, it should not qualify to be a supply. Of course, in a parent subsidiary scenario, there are scenarios wherein there are more than 2 companies and there are other group companies which are established in India or abroad for that matter. In those cases, if the subsidiary using those IPR rights provided by the parent company to provide services to various other group companies, in those cases, there is commercial exploitation by the subsidiary of the IPR rights provided by the parent company. And in those cases, if services are provided to other group companies, then there may be a requirement to call it a supply and hence pay GST on those transactions. The recipient in India may be required to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. Activities in the nature of quality control. It is an extension of what we discussed in the previous slide. While in the previous slide, we are focusing more about IPR rights, there can be some certain other support that parent company could provide to the subsidiary, which could be overseeing the manufacturing activities that are undertaken by the subsidiary company, could be one, inspection of the goods manufactured by the subsidiary, or in some cases, the parent company may depute certain employees of its to the subsidiary company so that they oversee the activities that are performed by the subsidiary entity. Also, in certain cases, what happens is, suppose in a technical support kind of a scenario, the Indian subsidiary may not be aware of certain queries by the customers, end customers. In those cases, the parent company may provide certain support to the subsidiary entity in replying to those queries or replying to those mails by the customers. These are commonly seen in ITS industry. These activities that are performed by the parent company are purely to protect its interest as a customer. It has got nothing to do with it being a related party transaction. Even if the supplier is a third party instead of a subsidiary, even then this quality control activities would be performed by the parent company, even for those third party. Therefore, in this kind of a scenarios, we believe that these transactions should not qualify to be a supply. These are purely to enable the subsidiary to provide the services back to the parent company itself. The parent company is merely protecting its interest in the capacity of a customer. For example, in the R&D setup, of course, we are moving back to the previous slide here. In an R&D setup, the parent company provides, say, the first basic software which it wants the subsidiary to develop. Therefore, it is important for parent company to provide the basic software to the subsidiary entity so that it can develop it and provide the developed software to the parent company. Therefore, you cannot call the basic software that is provided to the parent company to the subsidiary a service and demand GST on it. It is in a way to say that it is an obligation for the parent company to provide that basic version of the software to its subsidiary. It is purely to enable the subsidiary to provide services back to the parent company. While we understand that these are merely obligations and this is commonly understood by parent and subsidiary as well, it is important that these taxpayers document this particular activities under its obligations in the agreements that they're executing with their subsidiary companies in India. It could clearly be carved out in the obligations of the recipient in the agreement so that in case of any audit queries by the department, these can be easily substantiated. The next transaction that we are focusing on are management services that are performed by the parent company to its subsidiaries in India. Examples could be back office support services, which parent company provides, say HR activities or legal services, reviewing the agreements, or certain budgeting activities that are undertaken. These are certain management services that are performed by the parent company. These, if you see, are different from the two transactions that we discussed in the previous slides. These are not to protect the interest in the capacity of a customer, but there is a certain activity of the supply that is being undertaken by the parent company towards its subsidiary. If at all there was no parent company here, probably the subsidiary would have hired certain third parties to provide these activities, unless they have certain employees to carry out those activities itself. So we believe that these management services there is a need for these transactions wherein GST needs to be paid by the recipient under reverse charge mechanism. The taxpayers could recall a case law or appellate advance ruling in the case of Columbatia, wherein it was held that the activities mentioned above, the HR activities or finance activities that are undertaken by the head office for its branches qualifies to be a supply, and there is a need for payment of GST. Of course, that appellate advance ruling was in the context of distinct persons, that is, branches of the same entity in India. Many of us believe that the appellate advance ruling is bad in law because it does not appreciate that employees are employees of the company and not of the particular branch. That being said, but under the scenarios that we are discussing here, it is two different companies. One is a parent company, another is a subsidiary company. Because there are two different companies involved here, the activities carried out by one company for other in the nature of management services would qualify to be a supply, and the recipient would have to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. These kind of setup can also be seen under domestic group companies as well, where there are two group companies and the employees are hired in one particular company, wherein they oversee the activities of other group companies as well. In those cases, unless the employees are under dual employment of both the group companies, then there could be a requirement for one company to charge GST for the activities performed for the other company. We'll discuss about the valuation in the next few slides. There's one last transaction that we want to focus on, wherein the parent company performs certain activities in the capacity of a shareholder, which could be a corporate guarantee that is provided to the subsidiary, or the board meetings conducted, the expenses incurred for the board meetings, or for raising funds for the subsidiary entities, or consolidation of books of accounts, or audit, etc., etc. Right? These activities are performed by the parent company not for gaining any benefit out of it, rather it is an obligation that the parent company has because of its ownership interests in the subsidiary entity. In this context, it is important to discuss the OECD guidelines. In the context of transfer pricing, the OECD guidelines provides that the shareholding activities performed by the parent company would not qualify to be a supply, and therefore there cannot be a cross charge that can be undertaken between parent company and subsidiary when the activities are in the nature of shareholding activities. We believe that a similar treatment should be provided under GST law as well. But having said that, the definitions under GST law, the definition of supply and the definition of business are so exhaustive that it covers transactions which are undertaken even for one time. Even a one-time activity is considered to be a business and therefore qualifies to be a supply, and GST needs to be paid on it. While we understand that it is an obligation that certain activities are performed for subsidiary, but the law as on today seems that a corporate guarantee kind of a setup is taxable and GST needs to be paid on it. In line with that discussion, a circular was issued wherein it provides that a central government giving bank guarantees for a PSUs would be liable to GST and tax needs to be paid on it. While in our personal view, we believe that these should not be taxable, but as on today, there is no clarification as such on discussing in detail with respect to our related party transactions. We'll have to await for a circular that GST department could issue in future, because there is very little precedence on these particular transactions that are happening between two related parties. These are some of the aspects that needs to be considered before concluding whether a transaction undertaken by the parent company for its subsidiary qualifies to be a supply. The activities listed down on the screen are basically some of the aspects that we've already discussed in previous slides, which needs to be kept in mind before concluding the taxability. Objective of performance and of an activity. Why would a parent company provide certain activities for its subsidiary? Whether it is to gain certain benefit out of it, or is it to enable the subsidiary to provide services back to the parent company, is to be kept in mind. Beneficiary of the activity, whether it's the parent company or the subsidiary company itself who is benefiting out of the activity. If an activity is provided by the parent company for its subsidiary, the beneficiary there is the subsidiary who is getting certain activities, receiving certain IPR rights or certain activities from the parent company to provide services back to the parent company. The beneficiary, their direct beneficiary, would be the subsidiary, and those activities may not qualify to be a supply. Of course, like we discussed in previous slides, there are certain obligations that are performed by the parent company. It's not to gain any benefits, it's an obligation which could also probably be defined in the agreement itself. When an activity is undertaken as an obligation, it cannot be qualified to be a supply. We'll also have to analyze whether the recipient is gaining any commercial benefit out of the IPR rights or any activity performed by the parent company. If there is no commercial exploitation, then there is often a case to build saying that the activity is not a supply and therefore GST is not applicable on those particular transactions. Also, like we discussed in previous slides, we'll also have to see if those activities are performed by the parent company would have been performed by a third party or no. If the answer to that question is that there would not be a service that would have been provided by a third party, then there is a case to say that there is no supply. Also, because under cross-border transactions, there are already precedents from the income tax regime, it is also important to analyze the income tax provisions with respect to transfer pricing before concluding the taxability under GST regime. The both will have to be looked at before concluding the GST provisions. Like we discussed, the shareholding activities under OECD guidelines say that those activities do not qualify to be a supply, and we believe the same treatment should be given under GST regime as well. Under GST provisions also, those shareholding activities should not ideally qualify to be a supply. With that, let's move ahead to the valuation aspects. Like we all know, if there are two related parties involved, then the valuation is governed by CGST rules. It is no longer a transaction value provided under Section 15 of CGST Act. The valuation for two related parties will have to be looked at basis CGST rules. Rule 28 provides that for any transaction between related parties, the valuation has to be in line with open market value. However, there is a relaxation, provided under second proviso to Rule 28, which provides that in case the recipient is eligible for full input tax credit, then there is whatever value is declared in the invoice would be deemed to be open market value. Therefore, if an Indian subsidiary is eligible for full input tax credit, then conservatively, although the activity may not qualify to be supply, conservatively, the subsidiary may look at adopting a nominal value for those activities and discharge the GST under reverse charge mechanism, either claim refund of it or claim input tax credit of it. And that conservative approach could be adopted by adopting a nominal value instead of going for a full open market value, given the relaxation under proviso to Rule 28. If at all the Indian recipient is not eligible for full input tax credit, then if the costs incurred by the parent company are known to the recipient, then the costs so incurred plus 10% could be adopted for discharging the GST under reverse charge mechanism. Also, one other aspect that needs to be considered before analyzing the valuation is that the value that is adopted for paying the GST need not be paid to the supplier as such. The recipient can merely adopt the value merely for discharging GST, and that value in actual need not be paid to the supplier. However, if the recipient wants to pay that amount to the supplier, then the valuation needs to be arrived at in consensus with the TP provisions, because the value that would be adopted would also be claimed as income tax benefit. And if the value adopted is not in line with the TP provisions, then under the income tax provisions, the expenses that are claimed could be disallowed. Therefore, before arriving at a value, we will also have to look at what does the TP provisions talk about valuation with respect to those particular transactions. We've mainly undertaken this session for you taxpayers because we've seen in the recent past, that there are certain notices that are being issued to IT/ITES industries where they're looking at the related party transactions. It is very easy for officers to pick up these transactions because in the financial statements, the related party transactions are disclosed. Therefore, officers can directly pick up those transactions and scrutinize what are the activities that are undertaken, where there is no consideration involved. Therefore, GST compliance could be looked at by the officers. The same is happening with respect to certain taxpayers in the industry, wherein there are notices already being issued, and it is sooner or later that all the companies wherein these kind of transactions are involved, the officers could look at it, scrutinize the transactions, and issue notices. Because of the COVID pandemic, the notices have been very few, but however, it's already been 4 years into GST. Therefore, we could expect the GST department to pick up these transactions and issue notices to the taxpayers. It is important for the taxpayers to be ready with these transactions, be prepared for the audit, for answering any queries by the GST department. Like we discussed while starting our session, there is very little precedence with respect to Schedule 1 transactions because these transactions were not taxed under service tax regime. While taxpayers do not have any precedence, the same is the case with the department as well. Therefore, department may adopt a conservative approach and issue notices for taxing these transactions without analyzing it in detail because they do not have any precedence on these transactions. Therefore, before these kind of activities are undertaken by the department, it is important that the tax positions are documented, well documented, and GST, if there's any activities which qualifies to be a supply, it is important that GST is remitted well before audit is undertaken. Mainly because if at all GST is paid and invoices are issued prior to GST department scrutinizing these transactions, there is a case for adopting a nominal value like we discussed under Rule 28. The proviso provides that a nominal value could be adopted when case the recipient is eligible for full input tax credit. That is the case where the value is adopted and disclosed in the invoice. And if these transactions are not some transactions where GST is already paid and GST is paid once the notices are issued, then the case for adopting a nominal value is no longer available, and the full value, the full open market value needs to be adopted once the GST department picks up these transactions. Therefore, it is important that the taxpayers are well equipped for an audit for these transactions. Like we discussed, there's very little precedence on these transactions, given that these transactions are not taxed under service tax regime. Therefore, it is important that the policymakers come out with a circular analyzing these transactions in detail, like we discussed, keeping various aspects in mind before concluding the taxability. detailed circular needs to be issued in order to avoid disputes in the future with respect to related party transactions. With that, we conclude our session. If there are any queries with respect to related party transactions, be it a cross-border transaction or a domestic transaction between two related parties, the queries can be shared with the email IDs mentioned on the screen. We would be very happy to look at your queries and respond to them. Please reach out to us if there are any queries. Thank you so much for patiently listening to us, and we hope we have enlightened you with respect to Schedule 1 transactions. Thank you all.